Now, I say potentially, and you brought it up in your question, the load forecasting for data centers is horrible right now.
Mm,
So most data centers are developed under what are called non-disclosure agreements, legal term, which means that when the data center is talking to a utility, the utility can't talk about who's going to build, what the size of it is, and other factors, which means that, and we'll just use an example, a big hyperscaler, a Google or a Meta, Amazon could be talking to Commonwealth Edison. They could be talking to Commonwealth Edison about building a data center in ComEd service territory. They could also be talking to WEC Energy in Wisconsin about it and NIPSCO in Indiana. They're not going to build three. They're going to build one data center, likely, or none in this area, but that might show up in all three of the load forecasts for those three different utilities that they're talking to. And then the utilities send their load forecasts to the regional transmission or independent service operators, the RTOs and ISOs, in our case, PJM and MISO. All three of those might send that in, and then the RTOs take those load forecasts and incorporate that with the other load forecasts they get from the other utilities. We don't know exactly what that impact is. And if we get it wrong on either side, there are huge consequences for that. And your question, what if we build it and nobody comes? Now all of the other ratepayers are left saddled with having built a bunch of capacity that isn't going to get used, which just adds to cost. Or if we underbuild, we have not only the problem of having enough resources, lights, going out, that kind of thing, or a lot more demand response and load shedding, or the costs get very incredibly high again because you're purchasing more power from outside. So the idea of getting the load forecasting right is probably the biggest single issue that we can do, because then at least we'll have a good understanding of what we need to do. Uh, in addition to that, so most states, including Illinois, would like to have the data centers in their state. And the reason being, there's a huge amount of construction jobs that go with that. A lot of communities really like it, not all, but a lot of communities like it because there's huge property tax revenue that's associated with it. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, but there aren't a lot of permanent jobs necessarily that go with the data centers. And while that may or may not be true, there are a lot of, these are always, they're always repairing, adding, doing additional things. So there are a lot of construction type jobs that are there on a regular basis. But even if there's not, if you're a municipality, and I used to be a mayor back once upon a time, if you're a municipality and you get a huge property tax influx from the data center and there aren't a lot of jobs, you're not putting strain on other services. You're not putting strain on schools, you're not putting strain on housing, on other infrastructure issues. So a lot of communities really want the data centers. And for a state like Illinois, you could say, well, yeah, but you don't have to take them in your state, and you don't. But if they locate somewhere else in PJM or in MISO, that's going to increase the power need in PJM or MISO, which increase the costs for them. And our ratepayers will pay for it anyway, at least a portion of it anyway. So the feeling is bring them in, but under a couple of conditions. Let's make sure we have the resource adequacy for them. And I'll get to the last question you asked because that it affects that. And also the second part is make sure that other ratepayers aren't holding the bag and paying for costs that should be assumed by the data centers. And so those are the two biggest issues that we're seeing.